Thick fog surrounded the airfield at Croydon as the aeroplane made its descent and the wings dipped from side to side at one or more of the abortive attempts to land. Death in the air seemed a dignified end for Vivien as she stirred in her seat. They had almost died in a plane crash in 1946 when they were rushing from New York to London. On that fated journey, Larry remembered the choking of the engines as they caught fire and the tormented look in Vivien's eyes as she faced death. They belly flopped onto a field in Connecticut and miraculously lived to tell the tale. Before taking off from Los Angeles to New York, Vivien had to be restrained and sedated. She was lumbered into the back of an ambulance, tied to a stretcher, and buried under a blanket. The reporters caught her on the airfield at LaGuardia as the doors opened. Her skeletal face and hollow eyes cast dark shadows in the photographs. In the car at the airfield on the West Coast, she had delayed the flight to New York by an hour after she began to cry hysterically and refused to board it. Eventually, Larry dragged her out of the car and she climbed up the steps. "So sorry, folks," she called to the waiting reporters. The experiences at both airports were much the same as they crossed the 2 time zones and coasts ahead of the connecting flight to London. All rationality seemed to evaporate into thin air when it came to Vivien and logistics. The reporters in Los Angeles believed Larry's explanation that she was afraid of flying and obeyed his request not to take photographs so as not to startle her before takeoff, a rare victory for him, but the gossip columnists in Hollywood were already reporting on her nervous exhaustion. Hours into the flight to New York, Larry awoke in his seat and felt someone watching him. "You look exhausted. Are you all right?" Vivien asked him. He engaged her in idle chit-chat until he noticed her eyes starting to close. On their final journey to London, the sedative failed to work, and Vivien insisted she could not leave the United States. She had a contract with Paramount. Nobody knew what to do, and if she managed to break loose, the waiting reporters would have had a field day with the story. Larry pointed to the injection in the nurse's hand and said, "Give her another." She was forcibly sedated once more and carried to the back of the plane and watched by the nurse. Those words and the coldness of his voice would haunt Vivien for years to come. At Croydon Airfield, the English reporters followed the scent of blood, though were more orderly than their American counterparts. Larry looked out of the window, detecting dim headlights in a sea of fog, and he looked to the nurse who sat upright in her seat, exhausted from the transatlantic flight. The brakes screeched to a halt like a drill before the curtain rose and the players dashed to their marks, ready to go. The nurse went to Vivien's side and checked her vital statistics and wrote in her diary. Larry kept his gaze on the window as the headlights drew closer.